Her lips brushed against his in the silence of the sick room, a confession she thought would remain her secret forever. But when his golden eyes opened at dawn and locked onto hers with unbearable awareness, Isla realized the Alpha King had heard every whispered truth, every desperate prayer, and felt every stolen kiss she had pressed to his mouth while believing him lost to the world. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The Storfong Palace was a fortress of stone, firelight, and unspoken fear, but Isla Thorne had never been inside it until the night she arrived, soaked to the bone, clutching a letter sealed with the Queen Mother's insignia, and wearing a traveling cloak that smelled faintly of old herbs and very bad luck. She expected coldness, perhaps duty. What she did not expect was to be escorted through torchlit corridors by a grim-faced guard who looked as though smiling would cause him physical injury. "The Queen Mother awaits," he had said, bowing stiffly. Isla followed him, trying not to gape at the wolf statues lining the walls, each carved so lifelike she half expected them to shift and blink. She'd heard the stories, of course. The Storfong lineage was ancient, powerful, and just a bit dramatic. Their alpha blood was rumored to be touched by the moon goddess herself. But rumors had never prepared her for the sight of the Alpha King sprawled unconscious in his grand bed. He looked carved from war. Broad shoulders. A dark beard that framed a face both brutal and beautiful. The fur mantle draped across him made him appear even more imposing. A massive wolf lay beside the bed, eyes like winter skies, watching every move Isla made with unnerving intelligence. She nearly tripped over her own feet. Of course, she thought drily, the man I owe my life to turns out to be a half-godly wolf tyrant sleeping like a fairy tale curse victim. When the Queen Mother entered, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, Isla straightened at once. The older woman moved with the kind of grace that came from decades of holding a kingdom together through sheer will. "He trusts no healers," the Queen Mother whispered, gazing at her son with grief tempered by royal steel. "But he trusted you. As a child, he followed you like a shadow. You saved him once from a river's pull. Perhaps you can save him again." Isla swallowed hard. She did remember a boy wild, stubborn, always smelling faintly of pine and mischief, and how he once nearly drowned chasing a broken toy boat downstream. She remembered dragging him out by the ear while he sputtered and protested. But she certainly hadn't expected that muddy, snot-nosed boy to become the Alpha King of Storfong. And she certainly hadn't expected to be summoned to sit vigil by his bedside. The Queen Mother's hand settled gently on Isla's shoulder. "His name is Kieran," she said softly, as if speaking it aloud might anchor him to this world. "Kieran Storfong. And he is slipping away from us, inch by inch. The healers say his body heals, but his spirit wanders somewhere we cannot reach." Isla's throat tightened. "Your Majesty, I'm no healer. I don't know what I could possibly." "You knew him before he was a king." The Queen Mother's voice cracked, just slightly. "Before the crown. Before the weight of this kingdom pressed down on his shoulders. You knew the boy who laughed. Who climbed trees and scraped his knees and lived without the burden of destiny crushing him." The wolf beside the bed lifted its massive head, fixing Isla with an unblinking stare. "That is Fenrir," the Queen Mother added. "Kieran's bonded wolf. He has not left his side since the attack." "Attack?" Isla's voice came out smaller than she intended. The Queen Mother's expression darkened. "Ambush. 3 nights ago, on the northern border. Rival pack. They knew Kieran rode ahead of his guard, he always does, stubborn fool, and they struck before anyone could reach him." Her hands clenched into fists. "They nearly succeeded." Isla looked at the unconscious king, at the bandages wrapped around his torso, the bruising along his jaw. He didn't look like a man on the edge of death. He looked like a warrior resting between battles. But she could see it now, the too-still quality of his breathing, the pallor beneath his tan skin. "I'll stay," Isla heard herself say. "For as long as you need me." The Queen Mother's eyes filled with unshed tears. "Thank you, child." The first night was the hardest. Isla sat in the high-backed chair beside Kieran's bed, hands folded in her lap, acutely aware of every creak of the floorboards, every pop of the fire, every breath the unconscious king took. Fenrir watched her with those unnerving pale eyes, his massive head resting on his paws. "I'm not going to hurt him," Isla muttered to the wolf. "You can stop looking at me like I'm about to steal the silverware." The wolf's tail thumped once against the floor. Isla took that as approval. She reached for the leather-bound book on the bedside table, a collection of old legends, the kind mothers read to children before bed. Her fingers traced the worn spine, and she wondered if Kieran had read these same stories as a boy. "All right," she said softly, opening to a random page. "Let's see. The Tale of the Moon Goddess and the First Wolf. How fitting." She began to read aloud, her voice filling the quiet room. At first, her words felt awkward, too loud in the stillness. But gradually, she found a rhythm. The story wove itself around them, a tale of transformation, of wild magic, of wolves who ran beneath silver moons and kings who were chosen by fate. When she finished, she glanced at Kieran's face. Nothing. No movement. No sign he'd heard a single word. Isla sighed and set the book aside. "Well, that was thrilling for exactly one of us," she muttered. Fenrir's ears twitched. "Fine. 2 of us." She leaned back in the chair, exhaustion tugging at her bones. She'd traveled for 2 days straight to reach the palace, barely stopping to rest. But sleep felt impossible now, with Kieran lying so still, so wrong in his silence. "You know," she said, "more to fill the silence than anything else, I really thought you'd forgotten about me." "That day at the river, I mean." "You were what, 8? 9? She shook her head. "I was 12 and entirely too bossy." "I'm sure you hated me." The firelight flickered across Kieran's face, casting shadows that made him look almost otherworldly. "I never forgot, though," Isla continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You looked at me like I was the bravest person you'd ever seen. Even though I was terrified the whole time. Even though I barely managed to pull you out before the current swept us both away." She rubbed her arms, chasing away a sudden chill. "Your mother said you followed me like a shadow after that." "I don't remember that part." A rueful smile tugged at her lips. "I suppose I was too busy trying to survive my own life to notice a lovesick boy trailing after me." The word lovesick hung in the air, and Isla's cheeks heated. "Not that you were, I didn't mean." She groaned and covered her face with her hands. "Moon Goddess, I'm talking to an unconscious man and somehow still managing to embarrass myself." Fenrir made a sound that was suspiciously close to a chuff of amusement. "Don't you start," Isla warned him. She stood and moved to the basin of water on the side table, dampening a cloth. Gently, carefully, she pressed it to Kieran's forehead, wiping away the faint sheen of sweat that had gathered there. His skin was warm. Feverish, but not dangerously so. Up close, she could see the small scars that marked him, a thin line through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. Evidence of a life spent fighting, protecting, surviving. "You have to wake up," she whispered, her throat tight. "Your mother needs you. Your kingdom needs you. I need you." The thought came unbidden, and Isla shoved it away immediately. She barely knew this man. The boy from her childhood was a ghost, a memory. This Kieran, this Alpha King, was a stranger. But as she smoothed the damp cloth across his brow, as her fingers accidentally brushed against his temple, something stirred in her chest. Something old and aching and dangerous. "Please," she breathed. "Come back." Behind his closed eyelids, Kieran Stormfang heard every word. His wolf stirred, restless and aching, desperate to respond. But his body remained locked in place, a prison of flesh and bone that refused to obey. He could feel her touch, soft, hesitant, unbearably gentle. He could smell her wildflowers and wood smoke, a scent that tugged at memories he'd buried deep. And her voice. Moon goddess, her voice. It wrapped around him like a lifeline, pulling him back from the dark void where he'd been drifting, lost and alone. Isla. He'd never forgotten her. Not for a single day. And now she was here at his bedside, whispering prayers he didn't deserve. If he could have moved, he would have reached for her hand. Would have told her the truth, that she'd haunted him for years, that the memory of her had kept him sane through battles and bloodshed and the crushing weight of a crown he'd never wanted. But he couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could do was listen, and fall a little more in love with every word she spoke. By the third night, Isla had developed a routine. She would arrive at dusk, carrying a basket of supplies, fresh linens, herbs for poultices, sometimes a book she'd borrowed from the palace library. The guards no longer questioned her presence. The servants had stopped whispering when she passed. She was simply the woman who sat with the Alpha King, the woman who refused to let him slip away. Tonight, she brought wildflowers, foolish, perhaps, but the sick room felt too much like a tomb, and she needed something alive, something bright to push back against the oppressive stillness. Fenrir lifted his head as she entered, tail wagging once in greeting. "Hello to you too," Isla murmured, setting down her basket. She arranged the wildflowers in a ceramic vase near the window, their purple and gold petals catching the last rays of sunset. When she turned back to the bed, she froze. Kieran's hand had moved. Not much, just a slight curl of his fingers against the sheets. But it was movement. The first she'd seen since arriving. Her heart lurched into her throat. "Kieran?" She rushed to his side, leaning close. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. His eyes remained closed, his breathing steady and unchanged. Isla's shoulders sagged. Wishful thinking, she muttered to herself. "You're seeing things that aren't there." But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That he was closer to the surface now, struggling against whatever darkness held him. She settled into her chair and reached for his hand, an impulse she didn't question. His fingers were warm, calloused from years of sword work. She traced the lines of his palm absently, committing them to memory. "The Queen Mother told me something today," Isla said softly. "She said you used to sneak into the palace kitchens as a boy and steal honey cakes. That the cooks pretended not to notice, because you always looked so pleased with yourself." She smiled, picturing it, a wild-haired boy with golden eyes and sticky fingers, thinking himself terribly clever. "She also said you hate formal banquets. That you'd rather eat in the stables with your guards than sit through another 7-course meal with visiting dignitaries." Isla's thumb brushed across his knuckles. "I can't blame you. I've attended exactly one royal banquet in my life, and I spent the entire evening trying not to use the wrong fork." Fenrir padded closer, resting his massive head on the edge of the bed near Kieran's shoulder. The wolf's pale eyes fixed on Isla with an intensity that made her shiver. "Does he know I'm here?" she asked the wolf. "Can he hear me?" Fenrir's ears pricked forward. Isla took that as a yes. Her grip on Kieran's hand tightened. "Then listen closely, Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You don't get to leave. Not yet. Not when there's still so much." She broke off, swallowing hard against the sudden tightness in her throat. "So much I need to say to you. So much I never got the chance to." "Your kingdom needs you," she finished instead, the words feeling hollow and insufficient. "Your people need their Alpha King." But it wasn't the kingdom she was thinking about as she sat there, holding his hand in the firelight. It was the boy who'd once looked at her like she hung the moon. The boy who'd never stopped mattering, even after she'd convinced herself he had. Inside his prison of flesh and bone, Kieran's soul roared with frustration. He could feel her hand in his. Could feel the warmth of her skin, the gentle pressure of her fingers intertwined with his own. He'd moved his hand earlier, a monumental effort that had taken every scrap of willpower he possessed. He'd thought maybe it would be enough to show her he was still here. Still fighting. But she dismissed it as imagination, and he'd wanted to scream. I'm here, Isla. I'm right here. His wolf paced restlessly inside him, desperate to break free, to show her the truth. But the connection between his consciousness and his body remained fractured, a bridge half collapsed and impassable. All he could do was listen to her voice, that warm, wry, achingly familiar voice, and commit every word to memory. She thought the kingdom needed him. She had no idea that he needed her. That her presence was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world, the only light in an endless dark. Tell me something, Isla said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Did you really follow me around after I pulled you from that river? Or was your mother exaggerating? She didn't expect an answer, of course. But talking to him had become easier than sitting in silence, easier than acknowledging how deeply wrong it felt to see him like this, powerful and vital and alive, yet somehow absent. I'll confess something, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I used to see you at the market sometimes. Years later, after you'd grown. You probably don't remember, why would you, but I did. Her cheeks heated, but she pushed forward. You were always surrounded by people. Guards, advisors, fawning courtiers. But sometimes, when you thought no one was looking, you'd get this expression on your face. Like you were tired. Bone-deep tired of carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. She traced absent patterns on the back of his hand. I wanted to say something. To ask if you remembered me. But I was nobody, just the healer's daughter from the lower villages. And you were the Alpha King. You were untouchable. And I was afraid. I convinced myself it didn't matter, Isla murmured. That the boy I knew was gone. That you'd become someone else entirely, someone I couldn't possibly understand. She lifted her gaze to his face, studying the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark lashes fanned against his cheeks. But your mother's eyes, when she talks about you, she sees that boy still. The one who snuck honey cakes and hated formal dinners. The one who cared more about his people than his crown. Isla's voice caught. I think I see him too. The fire crackled. Fenrir's breathing deepened into sleep. And Isla sat there, holding the hand of an unconscious king, wondering when exactly she'd started to care so much. The nightmare came without warning. One moment Kieran was drifting in the gray space between sleep and waking, Isla's voice wrapping around him like a lifeline. The next, he was drowning, pulled under by icy water, his lungs screaming for air, darkness closing in from all sides. The river. Always the river. His childhood terror made manifest, dragging him down, down, down. No. He fought against it, thrashing in the dark. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. But the water pressed in, cold and merciless, and he was 8 years old again, small and helpless and terrified. Kieran. Isla's voice cut through the nightmare like a blade. In the waking world, his body convulsed. His back arched off the bed, every muscle seizing at once. A strangled sound tore from his throat, the first sound he'd made in days. Kieran, no, someone help. Isla's hands were on his shoulders, trying to hold him still as he thrashed. Guards. I need. Fenrir leapt to his feet, a howl tearing from the wolf's throat that shook the very stones of the palace. Kieran's eyes flew open. Gold. Burning bright gold, unfocused and wild. For one heartbeat, too, his gaze locked onto Isla's face. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed against the pillows, unconscious once more. Isla stood there, shaking, her hands still pressed against his shoulders, his skin burning hot beneath her palms. The door burst open. Guards flooded in, followed by a healer in dark robes. What happened? The healer demanded, pushing past Isla to examine Kieran. I don't know. Isla's voice came out thin, breathless. He seized. And his eyes. His eyes opened? The healer's head snapped up. You're certain? Yes. Isla wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. For just a moment, they were gold. So bright I could barely. The healer's expression shifted into something Isla couldn't read. This is good. Very good. It means he's fighting his way back. But he's still unconscious, yes, but closer to the surface. The healer checked Kieran's pulse, his breathing. Whatever you've been doing, Miss Thorne, keep doing it. Your presence is reaching him. Isla nodded numbly, not trusting her voice. The healer swept out with the guards, leaving her alone with Kieran once more. And Fenrir, who watched her with knowing eyes. Isla sank back into her chair, her whole body trembling. He looked at her. For one impossible moment, Kieran had looked at her, and she'd seen something in those golden eyes. Recognition. He knew me. The thought sent her heart racing. She reached for his hand again, needing the connection, needing to know he was still there. Come back, she whispered fiercely. Do you hear me, Kieran Storfawn? Come back. His fingers twitched in her grasp. This time, she didn't dismiss it as imagination. The fifth night brought rain. It hammered against the windows of the sick room, a relentless drumming that matched the restless beat of Isla's heart. She'd arrived earlier than usual, unable to shake the memory of Kieran's eyes, those burning gold eyes that had looked at her with such intensity, even in the grip of his nightmare. She hadn't slept well since then. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him staring at her, saw the desperate recognition in his gaze. He knew me. The thought circled endlessly through her mind. Tonight, she'd brought nothing with her except herself. No books, no herbs, no distractions. Just the need to be near him, to sit vigil the way she had every night since arriving at Stormfang Palace. Fenrir greeted her with a soft whine, his massive head butting gently against her leg. I know, Isla murmured, scratching behind the wolf's ears. I miss him too. The wolf's pale eyes seemed almost sympathetic. Isla settled into her usual chair, closer to the bed than she'd dared sit before. Close enough that she could see the rise and fall of Kieran's chest, could count each breath he took. The storm outside sounds like the one from that day, she said quietly. The day you nearly drowned. Do you remember? She knew he couldn't answer. But somehow, talking to him had become as necessary as breathing. The river was swollen from spring rains. Your toy boat went sailing downstream, and you went after it without thinking. A faint smile touched her lips. You were always doing things without thinking. Drove your tutors mad, I'd wager. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I was gathering herbs near the riverbank. I saw you go under. Her voice dropped. I've never been so terrified in my life. The current was so strong, and you were so small, and I thought. She broke off, her throat tight. I thought I'd lose you before I ever really knew you. The confession hung in the air between them. Isla reached out, her fingers hovering just above his hand. Then, with a breath of courage, she took it, properly this time, not a gentle brush, but a firm grasp, her fingers threading through his. His hand was so much larger than hers. Strong, capable, scarred from battle. A king's hand. You held on to me so tightly when I pulled you out, she whispered. You wouldn't let go. You kept saying, don't leave, over and over until your mother came running. She traced her thumb across his knuckles. I think about that sometimes. About how desperately you held on. Like, even then you knew. Knew what? That some connections couldn't be severed? That some people were meant to find their way back to each other, no matter how many years stood between? Isla shook her head at her own foolishness. Listen to me, spinning fairy tales. The Queen Mother would say I've been reading too many romantic ballads. But her hand remained in his, warm and steady. Outside, lightning split the sky. Kieran felt her hand in his like a brand searing, undeniable, real. He'd been drifting closer to consciousness since his eyes had opened, since he'd broken through the surface for those few precious seconds. The connection between his mind and body was strengthening, threads knitting back together one agonizing strand at a time. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. He could hear Isla perfectly now. could feel every word she spoke like a physical touch, could sense the emotion threading through her voice. I thought I'd lose you before I ever really knew you. Those words echoed through him, settling somewhere deep in his chest. She'd thought about him, remembered him. After all these years, she'd remembered. His wolf surged with renewed determination. She was here, sitting beside him, holding his hand and confessing truths she thought he'd never hear. He had to reach her. Had to show her he was still fighting, still here, still. His fingers twitched. A deliberate movement this time, squeezing her hand with every ounce of strength he could summon. It wasn't much. Barely noticeable. But it was everything. Isla gasped. Kieran? She leaned forward, her free hand moving to his face, cupping his jaw. Can you hear me? His fingers squeezed again. Weak but unmistakable. Joy burst through her chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Oh, thank the moon goddess. You're in there. You're really in there. She laughed, the sound watery with relief. Squeeze once for yes, twice for no. Can you do that? 1 squeeze. Are you in pain? 2 squeezes. Can you open your eyes? A long pause. Then 2 squeezes, fainter than before, and Isla's heart clenched. That's all right, she said quickly. You don't have to. You're doing so well, Kieran. So incredibly well. She didn't realize she was crying until tears dripped onto their joined hands. I should fetch the healer, she said, even as she made no move to leave. They need to know you're responding. They need to. 1 squeeze. Firm. Almost urgent. You want me to stay? 1 squeeze. Isla's breath caught. I'm not going anywhere, she promised, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. Not until you tell me to. His hand relaxed in hers, and she could have sworn she felt relief emanating from him. The Queen Mother will be overjoyed, Isla murmured, settling back, but keeping her hand firmly in his. She's been beside herself with worry. We all have. I have. The admission felt too large, too dangerous to speak aloud. But it sat in her chest, a truth she couldn't deny any longer. Somewhere between arriving at Stormfang Palace and sitting vigil in this firelit room, between reading stories aloud and whispering confessions in the dark, Isla had stopped thinking of Kieran as the distant Alpha King. He'd become something else entirely. Someone who mattered. Someone whose absence would leave a hole in her world she wasn't sure she could fill. You have to wake up, she said softly. Properly wake up, I mean. Not just these little squeezes, as wonderful as they are. I need to see those golden eyes again. Need to hear your voice. Thunder rolled overhead, and Isla glanced toward the rain-streaked windows. I used to be afraid of storms, she admitted. When I was small, my mother would sit with me until they passed, telling me stories about the moon goddess dancing across the sky. She turned back to find Fenrir watching her, his head tilted. Your mother does the same for you, doesn't she? Isla asked Kieran. Sits with you through the storms. Literal and otherwise. 1 squeeze. So faint she almost missed it. She loves you very much, Isla whispered. They all do. This entire palace feels wrong without you in it. Like a body without a heart. She hesitated, then added, I feel it too. That wrongness. Like something essential is missing. Like you're missing. The words she couldn't quite bring herself to say. The 6th night, Isla brought honey cakes. She'd bribed the palace cook with a jar of her mother's famous sleeping tonic, worth its weight in gold to anyone who worked the kitchens, and arrived at the sick room with a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled of honey and cinnamon. Your mother mentioned these were your favorite, Isla said, setting them on the bedside table. I thought perhaps the smell might reach you wherever you are. Might help pull you back. She broke off a small piece, holding it near his face so the scent would drift over him. They're still warm, she added. The cook insisted I bring them immediately. I think half the kitchen staff is praying for your recovery. His fingers twitched against the sheets, a response she'd learned to watch for. I'm going to take that as approval of my bribery tactics, Isla said with a smile. She set the honey cake aside and took his hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "I have a confession," she said quietly. "I've been lying to your mother. She thinks I'm here out of duty. Because she asked. Because I owed her a debt for taking care of my family during the fever outbreak 3 winters past." She traced patterns on his palm. "But that's not why I keep coming back. It stopped being about duty somewhere around the second night, when you didn't wake up and I realized I wasn't ready to lose you. Not again. Not when I'd only just found you." The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by the crackling fire. "You probably don't remember this," Isla continued, "but after I pulled you from the river, after your mother came and took you home, you snuck back the next day. Brought me a handful of wildflowers, crushed and half dead, but you were so proud of yourself." She smiled at the memory. "You said, 'These are for saving me.' And then you ran away before I could say thank you." One squeeze. Deliberate and strong. "You do remember." Wonder filled her voice. Another squeeze. "I kept those flowers," Isla confessed. "Pressed them between the pages of my mother's herbal journal. They're probably dust by now, but I—" She trailed off, feeling suddenly vulnerable. "I couldn't bring myself to throw them away." His hand turned in hers, fingers curling around her palm as much as his weakened state would allow. It felt like a promise. Like an answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. "When you wake up," Isla whispered, leaning closer, "really wake up. There's so much I want to tell you. So many things I should have said years ago." She pressed her forehead gently against his hand, breathing in his scent, pine and smoke, and something wild that made her think of moonlit forests and ancient magic. "Please wake up soon," she breathed. "I'm running out of ways to say I need you." Inside his prison, Kieran's heart thundered. "I need you." Those 3 words undid something in him, broke through the last fragile barriers keeping him trapped. His wolf roared to life, surging against the bonds holding them back. Move. 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 Every fiber of his being strained toward her voice, toward the warmth of her hand, toward the impossible reality that Isla Thorne, the girl who'd saved him, who'd haunted his dreams for years, was sitting beside him, confessing she needed him. The connection between his consciousness and his body blazed like wildfire, threads fusing together faster now, stronger. He could feel his heartbeat accelerating. Could feel his lungs expanding with deeper breaths. Could feel control returning, inch by agonizing inch. "Hold on, Isla. I'm coming back. I'm coming back to you." The 7th night arrived with a storm that made the previous ones look like whispers. Thunder shook the palace walls. Lightning turned the world outside into stark flashes of white and shadow. Wind howled through the corridors like a living thing, and somewhere in the distance, Isla heard shutters banging against stone. She'd run through the rain to reach the sick room, her cloak soaked through, hair plastered to her face. The guard at the door had looked at her like she'd lost her mind, coming out in weather like this. Maybe she had. But the thought of Kieran alone during a storm, of him trapped in darkness while the world raged around him, had been unbearable. So she'd come. Fenrir lifted his head as she entered, his tail wagging once in greeting before he settled back down near the hearth. The wolf had barely left Kieran's side, as though his presence alone could anchor the Alpha King to this world. Isla peeled off her dripping cloak and moved to the fire, trying to warm herself. Her hands shook from cold or something else, she wasn't sure anymore. "I'm here," she called softly toward the bed. "I know you probably think I'm mad, coming out in this weather. But I couldn't." She broke off, pressing her lips together. "I couldn't bear the thought of you being alone." The admission felt too raw, too honest. She turned to find Kieran exactly as she'd left him that afternoon, still, silent, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. But there was something different about him tonight. A tension in his jaw. A tightness around his eyes. Isla moved closer, her wet skirts dragging across the floor. "The storm's bad tonight," she said quietly, settling into her chair. "Reminds me of, well, you know what it reminds me of." She reached for his hand automatically now, the gesture as familiar as breathing. His fingers curled around hers immediately. Strong. Deliberate. You're getting stronger, Isla murmured, relief flooding through her. I can feel it. One squeeze. Firm and sure. Good. She squeezed back. That's very good. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white. Thunder followed immediately after, a crack so loud Isla flinched. And Kieran's hand tightened around hers, almost painfully. Kieran? She leaned closer. Can you hear the storm? One squeeze. Does it bother you? A pause. Then one squeeze, hesitant. Understanding dawned. The river, Isla breathed. You're remembering the river. One squeeze. His fingers trembled in hers. Oh, Kieran. She brought her other hand up to cup both of hers around his. You're safe. I promise you're safe. The storm can't hurt you here. But she could feel his distress and the tension radiating through his hand, could sense the nightmare pulling at him even in his unconscious state. Listen to my voice, Isla said firmly. Focus on me, not the storm. You're not in the river. You're here in Stormfang Palace. You're warm and dry and... His breathing hitched. Quickened. Kieran, no, stay with me. She squeezed his hand tightly. Don't go back there. Stay here. Thunder rolled overhead like the voice of an angry god. Kieran's back arched slightly off the bed, a low sound catching in his throat. Damn it. Isla abandoned her chair, climbing onto the edge of the bed so she could get closer. Kieran, please. Listen to me. Follow my voice. She pressed one hand against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. With her other hand, she cupped his face, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. You're not drowning, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. You're here with me. Can you feel my hand? Feel how warm it is. She could feel his jaw clenching beneath her palm. The storm will pass, Isla continued, keeping her voice low and calm. It always does. And when it does, the sun will come out again. The birds will sing. Life will go on. Lightning flashed. And you will wake up, she whispered fiercely. You will open those golden eyes and you will come back to us. To your mother. To your kingdom. To me. Because I am not losing you to a memory, Isla said, her throat tight. Do you hear me, Kieran Storfang? I am not losing you. His breathing began to slow. The tension in his jaw eased fractionally. That's it, she encouraged. Focus on me. On my voice. She found herself stroking his hair back from his forehead, a tender gesture she'd never dared before. His hair was soft beneath her fingers, slightly damp with sweat. I've got you, Isla murmured. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. His hand found hers where it rested against his chest, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not desperate now, but anchoring. Grateful. There you are, she breathed. The storm raged on, but in the circle of firelight, Isla stayed curled against Kieran's side, her hand in his, murmuring soft reassurances until his breathing evened out completely and the nightmare released its hold. Kieran had never felt anything like this. The storm had dragged him under back to that day, back to the choking water and the terrible certainty that he was going to die. His 8-year-old self had been screaming, thrashing, drowning, and then Isla's voice had cut through it all like a blade of light. Stay with me. He'd followed that voice the way he'd followed it years ago when she'd pulled him from the river. Had let it guide him back from the edge of panic, back to the solid reality of her hand against his chest, her fingers in his hair, her warmth pressed against his side. She'd climbed onto the bed with him. Moon goddess. Even through the lingering fog of his paralysis, he could feel every point where her body touched his. Could smell her scent, stronger now, wildflowers and rain and something uniquely her. Could feel her breath against his neck as she whispered reassurances he didn't deserve. I am not losing you. Those words burned themselves into his soul. His wolf surged with possessive satisfaction. Mine, it rumbled. Ours. And for the first time since the ambush, Kieran didn't fight the truth he'd been avoiding. He was in love with Isla Thorne. Had been, perhaps, since the day she dragged him from the river with fierce determination in her eyes and mud streaking her face. Had definitely been since she'd started sitting vigil by his bedside, whispering confessions she thought he'd never hear. And now she was here, holding him through a storm, refusing to let him slip away. He had to wake up. Had to open his eyes and tell her the truth, that every word she'd spoken had reached him, that her voice had been his lifeline, that she was the reason he'd fought so hard to come back. The connection between his mind and body thrummed with energy, stronger than ever before. He could feel his fingers properly now. Could flex them, curl them around hers with intention. Could almost force his eyes to open. Not yet. Not quite yet. But soon. Very soon. Isla didn't realize she'd fallen asleep until she woke to silence. The storm had passed. Pale dawn light crept through the windows, painting everything in soft grays and golds. And she was still on the bed, still curled against Kieran's side with her head resting on his shoulder and her hand pressed against his chest. Oh no. She sat up quickly, mortification flooding through her. I shouldn't have. But Kieran's hand was still wrapped around her wrist, holding her in place. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. He looked peaceful now. The tension from the night before had melted away, leaving behind something that looked almost like contentment. I'm sorry, Isla whispered. I didn't mean to fall asleep here. That was highly inappropriate of me. His fingers tightened. One squeeze. It's all right. You're too kind, she murmured, but she didn't pull away. Not yet. The morning light caught in his dark hair, highlighting threads of bronze she'd never noticed before. His beard had grown longer during his illness, giving him a roguish look that did unfortunate things to her heart rate. She shouldn't be noticing these things. Shouldn't be cataloging the exact shade of his skin or the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheeks. But she couldn't seem to help herself. You're going to wake up today, Isla said softly. It wasn't a question. Somehow she knew. Could feel it in the way he held her hand, in the way his breathing had deepened and strengthened. Aren't you? One squeeze. Definite and sure. Her heart leapt. Truly? One squeeze. Then I should probably fetch the healer. And your mother. They'll want to be here when. His grip tightened. 2 squeezes. Urgent. You don't want me to get them? Isla's brow furrowed. But they need to know. They deserve to be here. 1 squeeze, agreement. Then another single squeeze, softer. But not yet. Understanding dawned. You want me to stay? Just a little longer. 1 squeeze. Isla's throat tightened. All right, she whispered. I'll stay. She settled back down, careful to maintain some propriety even as every instinct urged her closer. Her hand remained in his, their fingers intertwined like they'd been made to fit together. When you wake up properly, Isla said quietly, things will change. You'll be the Alpha King again. You'll have responsibilities, duties, a kingdom to run. She paused. And I'll go back to being nobody. Just the healer's daughter who happened to sit with you for a while. 2 squeezes. Sharp. Almost angry. No? Isla's voice wavered. You don't agree? 1 squeeze. Then his thumb moved, brushed deliberately across her knuckles in a gesture that felt almost like a caress. Her breath caught. Kieran. His chest rose with a deep breath. Deeper than any he'd taken since she'd arrived at the palace. And then, with monumental effort, his eyes opened. Gold. Bright, burning gold, fixed directly on her face. Isla froze, her heart stuttering in her chest. Hello, Isla, Kieran rasped, his voice rough from disuse, but unmistakably his. I heard you. The world tilted. Isla stared at him, at those golden eyes watching her with such intensity she could barely breathe, and felt every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her heart crumble to dust. You. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. How long? Since the beginning. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Since the first night you sat down and told me I'd been ungentlemanly about the mud. Horror washed over her. Everything? You heard everything. Every word. His hand tightened around hers. Every confession. Every secret you thought you'd never say aloud. Oh, moon goddess. Isla tried to pull back, mortification burning through her. I need to. Don't. His other hand moved slowly, weakly, but with clear intention, to catch her wrist before she could flee. Don't run from me, Isla. Not now. You heard me say She couldn't even finish the sentence, humiliation choking her. How can I possibly face you knowing that you need me? Kieran's thumb brushed across her racing pulse. That you kept those flowers I brought you? That you think about me? Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. This isn't fair. You weren't supposed to. I love you. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything. Isla's breath stopped. What? I love you, Kieran repeated, his voice stronger now. I have loved you since I was 8 years old and you pulled me from that river. I have loved you through every year that passed, every moment I searched for you in crowds and couldn't find you. I have loved you through this darkness, where your voice was the only light that reached me. You can't, Isla shook her head desperately. You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. You can't possibly. You saved my life twice, Kieran interrupted. Once from the river. Once from the darkness trying to pull me under. You sat with me every night. Read to me. Talk to me. Refused to let me slip away. His eyes burned into hers. You are not nobody, Isla Thorne. You are everything. A tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Kieran's thumb caught it, wiping it away with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I don't expect you to feel the same, he said quietly. I know I'm asking too much. But I needed you to know. Before you disappear back to your life. Before I lose my chance to tell you the truth. You're an idiot, Isla choked out. His eyebrows rose. Pardon. You're an idiot if you think I don't, she broke off, pressing her free hand against her eyes. I've been falling apart these past 7 nights. Terrified you wouldn't wake up. Terrified I'd lose you before I ever got to tell you. Tell me what? She lowered her hand, meeting his gaze directly. That I love you too, Isla whispered. That I've been half in love with you since I was 12 and you brought me those ridiculous crushed flowers. That I never forgot you, not for a single day. That coming here, sitting with you, holding your hand, it stopped being duty somewhere around the 2nd night and became something I couldn't live without. Kieran's eyes blazed brighter. So yes, Isla continued, her voice shaking. I love you. Even though it's foolish. Even though you're a king and I'm nobody. Even though this will probably end in heartbreak. I love you, Kieran Storfong. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Kieran tugged gently on her wrist, pulling her closer. Come here, he murmured. You're still recovering. You shouldn't. Isla. His voice held a note of command that sent shivers down her spine. Come here. She leaned in, her heart hammering, unsure what he wanted. And Kieran closed the distance between them, capturing her lips with his. The kiss was soft. Careful. Nothing like the stolen kiss she'd given him in the darkness, thinking he'd never know. This was a promise. An answer. A beginning. Isla's eyes fluttered closed, her hand coming up to cup his jaw as she kissed him back. He tasted like possibility and hope and something wild that called to the deepest parts of her soul. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. You kissed me, he murmured. On the 7th night, when you thought I was unconscious. Isla's cheeks flamed. You felt that. Felt it. Treasured it. Nearly lost my mind trying to respond. His lips curved into a smile. But this was better. Because now you know I'm kissing you back. I can't believe you heard everything, Isla groaned. I'm glad I did. Kieran's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Otherwise, I might never have known the bravest, fiercest, most extraordinary woman in the kingdom has been in love with me all this time. I'm not brave, Isla protested. You faced down an Alpha King sick room for 7 nights straight. You held my hand through nightmares and storms. You refused to let me go when it would have been easier to walk away. His eyes held hers. You are the definition of brave, Isla Thorne. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was seeing things that weren't there. But the way he looked at her, like she'd hung the moon and stars, made the words die on her tongue. Your mother is going to be overjoyed, Isla said instead, trying to regain some equilibrium. She already knows. Isla blinked. Knows what? That I'm in love with you. Kieran smiled. She figured it out the day you arrived. Said she recognized the look on my face, the same one my father used to get when he looked at her. But you were unconscious. Apparently, even unconscious, I'm transparent. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. She told me once, years ago, that I'd know my mate when I found her. That I'd feel it in my bones, in my wolf, in every breath I took. Isla's heart stuttered. Mate? You feel it too, Kieran said softly. It wasn't a question. That pull between us. Like we're 2 pieces of the same whole. She did feel it. Had felt it since the first night, though she'd tried to convince herself it was simply duty or nostalgia or... The bond, she breathed. The bond, Kieran agreed. Moon-blessed and true. The Queen Mother wept when she saw Kieran sitting upright in bed, color returned to his face and awareness burning bright in his golden eyes. My son, she breathed, rushing forward to embrace him carefully. Oh, my darling boy. Mother. Kieran's arms came around her, still weak but steady. I'm here. I'm all right. Isla stood near the window, giving them space for their reunion, her heart full to bursting as she watched them together. This was what mattered, a mother reunited with her son, an Alpha King returned to his people. The fact that her hand still tingled where Kieran had kissed it, that her lips still burned with the memory of his mouth on hers, those were secondary concerns. Or at least, they should be. The Queen Mother pulled back, cupping Kieran's face in her hands. The healers said it was impossible. That you were too far gone. But I knew, her voice broke. I knew you would fight your way back. I had help. Kieran's gaze found Isla across the room, warm and unmistakable. Someone refused to let me go. The Queen Mother turned, her eyes bright with tears and something that looked like understanding. Miss Thorne, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done. I did nothing special, Your Majesty, Isla said quickly. I simply sat with him. You did far more than that. The Queen Mother moved toward her, taking both of Isla's hands in hers. You brought my son back to me. There is no debt great enough to repay such a gift. Isla's cheeks heated. Truly I only. She loves him. Both women turned to stare at Kieran, who looked entirely too pleased with himself despite his weakened state. Kieran, Isla hissed, mortification flooding through her. And I love her, he continued, his smile widening. So we're going to need to make some arrangements. The Queen Mother blinked once. Twice. Then a slow smile spread across her face. Well, she said mildly. That certainly explains a few things. Your Majesty, he's delirious. Isla tried desperately. The fever must be. I am perfectly lucid, Kieran interrupted. And entirely serious. You've been awake for less than an hour, Isla protested. You can't possibly make declarations like that when you've barely recovered. I've had 7 days to think about it. Kieran's eyes held hers. 7 days of listening to you pour your heart out, of realizing exactly what I'd be losing if I didn't wake up. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The Queen Mother looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then she squeezed Isla's hands gently. My dear, I think we should speak privately. Kieran needs to rest, and you need, she paused delicately. Time to process. Mother, Kieran began. Rest, the Queen Mother commanded, her tone brooking no argument despite the affection in her eyes. You've been unconscious for over a week. You will not undo all of Miss Thorne's hard work by exhausting yourself now. Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, but Isla saw the exhaustion creeping into his features, the way he sagged slightly against the pillows. She's right, Isla said softly. You need to regain your strength. Will you come back? The vulnerability in his voice made her heart clench. Tonight? Isla glanced at the Queen Mother, uncertain. Of course she will, the Queen Mother said firmly. After we've had our talk. They sat in the Queen Mother's private solar, a comfortable room filled with afternoon sunlight and the scent of lavender. Tea sat untouched between them as the older woman studied Isla with eyes that saw far too much. How long have you been in love with my son? She asked without preamble. Isla nearly choked on air. Your Majesty, I don't think. Please. We're past the point of pretense. The Queen Mother's smile was gentle. I've watched you these past 7 nights. Seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. A mother knows these things. Isla's hands twisted in her lap. Since I was 12 years old, she admitted quietly. Since he brought me wildflowers after I pulled him from the river. Understanding dawned in the Queen Mother's expression. The crushed bouquet incident. He was so proud of those flowers. Despite her nervousness, Isla smiled. They were half dead and covered in mud, but given with a pure heart. The Queen Mother poured tea, the ritual giving them both a moment to breathe. He talked about you for years afterward. The girl who saved me, he'd say. The bravest person I've ever met. His father and I used to tease him about it. Isla's throat tightened. I didn't know. How could you? You disappeared back to your village and we thought, well, we assumed you'd forgotten all about our muddy little prince. She passed Isla a cup. But you didn't forget, did you? No. Isla stared into the amber liquid. I saw him sometimes. At the market. During festivals. Always surrounded by people, always so. Alone, the Queen Mother finished. Yes. The crown weighs heavy on those forced to wear it young. After his father died, Kieran, she paused, emotion flickering across her face. He became the king everyone needed him to be. Strong. Fierce. Untouchable. But the boy underneath, the one who collected river stones and climbed trees and laughed freely, that boy got buried somewhere along the way. Until I saw him again, Isla whispered. When I sat with him, talked to him, I could feel that boy still there, underneath everything else. Exactly. The Queen Mother leaned forward. Do you understand what I'm telling you, child? You didn't just save his life. You reminded him who he was before the crown. Before the weight of a kingdom settled on his shoulders. But I'm nobody, Isla said, the words tasting bitter. A healer's daughter. I have no title, no status, nothing that would make me suitable. You have his heart. The Queen Mother's voice was firm. And his wolf's recognition. Do you know what that means? Isla shook her head. The Storfong line is blessed and cursed by the moon goddess. We don't simply choose our mates. We recognize them. Soul deep and absolute. She set down her cup. Kieran's father recognized me the moment we met. I was a merchant's daughter, wholly unsuitable for a crown prince. The court was scandalized. Isla's eyes widened. You were. Common-born, yes. Not a drop of noble blood in my veins. The Queen Mother smiled. But his wolf knew, and so did he. We fought it for nearly a year, tried to be sensible, to think of duty and propriety and all the things that should have mattered more than they did. What changed? He nearly died. The words were soft but heavy. Injured in battle. And I realized that all the propriety in the world meant nothing compared to the thought of losing him. She met Isla's gaze directly. So I claimed him. Publicly. In front of the entire court. Told them that their prince was mine and they could accept it or rot. Despite everything, Isla laughed. You didn't. I absolutely did. Caused quite the scandal. The Queen Mother's eyes sparkled. But his wolf had recognized me, and the moon goddess's blessing isn't something even the most hidebound noble can argue against. Not when it manifests so clearly. How does it manifest? You'll know. The Queen Mother reached across to pat Isla's hand. When Kieran's wolf recognizes you fully, when you accept the bond, the mark will appear. A sign visible to all that you are his chosen mate, blessed by the goddess herself. Isla's mind reeled. This is all happening so fast. Love often does. The Queen Mother stood, moving to the window. But I didn't bring you here to pressure you, child. I brought you here to tell you that if you choose my son, if you accept what he's offering, you will have my full support. And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. Even though I'm perfect for him? The Queen Mother turned, her expression fierce. Yes, even though you're perfect for him. Even though you see him as a man first and a king second. Even though you love him enough to sit by his bedside for 7 nights and refuse to let him slip away. She crossed back to Isla. That is what a queen does. Not manage seating arrangements or wear pretty crowns. A queen stands beside her king when the darkness comes. She pulls him back from the edge. She reminds him why he fights. Tears burned in Isla's eyes. I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I. The Queen Mother smiled. But I learned. And you will too if you choose this path. The question is, do you love my son enough to try? Isla returned to the sick room as evening fell, her mind still spinning from her conversation with the Queen Mother. Kieran was asleep when she entered, his breathing deep and even. Fenrir lifted his head in greeting, tail wagging once before he settled back down. She moved quietly to her usual chair, not wanting to wake him. I can hear you, you know. Isla jumped. I thought you were asleep. Resting. Kieran's eyes opened, finding her immediately. There's a difference. He held out his hand. Come here. You need proper rest, not Isla. His voice held a note of command softened by affection. Please. She took his hand, letting him pull her closer until she was perched on the edge of the bed. My mother cornered you, Kieran said. It wasn't a question. She told me about your father. About their bond. Understanding flickered in his eyes. And now you're terrified. I'm not, Isla broke off at his knowing look. All right. Perhaps a bit terrified. Of me? Or of what I'm asking? Both. Neither. She rubbed her free hand over her face. Everything is happening so fast. Yesterday, you were unconscious. Today you're talking about bonds and mates and forever, Kieran finished quietly. I'm talking about forever, Isla. I understand that's frightening. It's not the forever that frightens me. The words spilled out before she could stop them. It's the thought that I'm not enough. That one day you'll wake up and realize you could have had anyone, a princess, a noble lady, someone who actually knows how to be a queen, and instead you're stuck with me. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then he tugged her hand, pulling her down until she was lying beside him, her head pillowed on his shoulder. Do you remember what you said to me? He murmured against her hair. That third night, when you thought I couldn't hear? Isla's cheeks heated. I said a lot of things. You said you saw me at the market sometimes. Saw me looking tired. Bone-deep tired of carrying everyone's expectations. His arm came around her waist, holding her close. No one else saw that. They saw the Alpha King. The warrior. The leader. But you saw me. Kieran. For 7 days, you sat with me. Read to me. Talked to me like I was just a man. Not a king. Not a title. Just Kieran. His hand moved to cup her face, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. Do you have any idea how precious that is? How rare. But I don't know anything about running a kingdom, Isla whispered. You know about compassion. About loyalty. About refusing to give up on someone even when it would be easier to walk away. His thumb brushed across her cheek. Those are the qualities that make a true queen. The rest, the protocol, the politics, that can be learned. Your court will hate me. Let them. His smile turned sharp. Anyone who can't see your worth isn't someone whose opinion I value. Isla wanted to argue more, to list all the reasons this was impossible. But lying here in his arms, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, all those reasons felt distant and unimportant. I'm still terrified, she admitted. Good. Kieran pressed a kiss to her forehead. That means you're smart enough to understand what you're getting into. But Isla, he waited until she looked at him. I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm not asking you to wake up tomorrow and be queen. I'm just asking you to stay. To give us a chance. Just stay, Isla repeated. Just stay. His arms tightened around her. Everything else, we'll figure out together. Now, before I continue, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you were Isla? Would you accept a love that could change your entire world, even if it meant facing fear and uncertainty? Or would you walk away from something that feels destined but terrifying? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. They stayed like that as the fire burned low and shadows lengthened across the room. Isla felt herself drifting, exhaustion from 7 nights of vigil finally catching up to her. You should go, Kieran murmured. Get proper rest in an actual bed. I'm comfortable here. The words slipped out before she could think better of them. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. Are you claiming my bed, Isla Thorne? I'm claiming my vigil rights, she countered. I sat with you for 7 nights. That entitles me to certain privileges. Does it now? Absolutely. She yawned. It's in the official Vigil Keeper's Charter. There's no such thing as a Vigil Keeper's Charter. There should be. Her eyes drifted closed. I'll have one written. First thing. When you're queen. The question was soft, barely audible. Isla's breath caught. But surrounded by warmth and safety, and the steady beat of his heart, the answer came easier than she'd expected. Maybe, she whispered. If you ask me properly. She felt him smile against her hair. I'll keep that in mind. 3 days later, Kieran stood before the council chamber, his hand resting on the ornate door handle, gathering his strength for what lay beyond. He'd recovered quickly, faster than the healers had expected, though they attributed it to his alpha healing rather than the truth. That having Isla by his side, her hand in his, her sense surrounding him, had done more to restore him than any medicine. The mate bond was strengthening daily. He could feel it now, a golden thread connecting them, thrumming with life whenever she was near. Soon, very soon, it would be complete. Visible to all. Undeniable. But first, he had to deal with his council. Your Majesty. His head advisor, Lord Cashin, bowed as Kieran entered. We're relieved to see you recovered. The kingdom has been concerned. I'm sure they have been. Kieran took his seat at the head of the massive table, noting the faces gathered around it. His most trusted advisors, his military commanders, the heads of the major houses. Which is why I've called you all here. We have much to discuss. Indeed. Lady Morrigan, head of House Thorhart, leaned forward. The northern border remains unstable. The Shadow Crest pack grows bolder by the day. Without your presence. They thought me weak. Kieran's voice was steel. Thought the attack had succeeded. That Storefying was leaderless and ripe for conquest. Murmurs rippled around the table. They thought wrong, Kieran continued. Send word to Shadowcrest's Alpha. Tell him the King of Storefying has risen, and he has a very long memory for those who strike at him in the dark. Lord Cashin nodded approvingly. Swift and decisive. The response they deserve. However, he paused delicately. There are other matters that require your attention. Matters of succession. Kieran's eyes narrowed. Speak plainly, Cashin. You are unwed, Your Majesty. No heir. The attack made your vulnerability clear. Cashin's expression was carefully neutral. The council believes it's time to consider alliances through marriage. Lady Genevieve of House Silverwood has expressed interest, as has Princess Talia of the Eastern Territories. I'm sure they have, Kieran said mildly. Both would be excellent political matches, Lady Morrigan added. Either would strengthen our position considerably. I have no doubt. Kieran leaned back in his chair. Unfortunately, I've already chosen my mate. Silence fell like a stone. Your mate? Lord Cashin's voice was carefully measured. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I was unaware you'd been courting anyone. I haven't been courting. I've been dying. Kieran's smile held no humor. And the woman who sat vigil by my bedside for 7 nights, who refused to let me slip away, who brought me back from the edge, that woman is my mate. Recognized by my wolf. Blessed by the moon goddess herself. Who? Lady Morrigan demanded. Isla Thorne. More silence. Then, the healer's daughter? Lord Cashin looked genuinely shocked. Your Majesty, surely you're not serious. Deadly serious. Kieran's voice dropped, carrying the weight of alpha command. My wolf has chosen. The bond is forming. This is not a matter for debate. But she's Lady Morrigan struggled for words. She's common-born. No title. No lands. No political value whatsoever. She saved my life, Kieran said flatly. She has more value than every political alliance you could propose combined. Your Majesty, please. Lord Cashin stood, his expression almost pleading. Think of the kingdom. Think of what this court needs. A queen with connections, with power to bring to the crown. Not some village girl who. The door to the council chamber slammed open. Isla stood in the doorway, her face flushed from running, her simple dress marking her as exactly what she was, common-born, out of place, entirely unsuitable for this world of power and politics. And absolutely magnificent in her fury. Some village girl who what? She demanded, stalking into the room like she owned it. Who saved your king's life while you sat in your comfortable homes? Who refused to give up when your precious healers declared him lost? Who loved him enough to fight for him when no one else would? Kieran's heart swelled with pride and something fiercer. That's my mate. Miss Thorne, Lady Morrigan said icily. This is a private council meeting. You have no right. I have every right. Isla's chin lifted. Your king just announced his intention to make me his mate. That gives me the right to defend myself against your insults. You cannot possibly think yourself suitable, Lord Cashin began. No. Isla's voice cut across his. I don't think myself suitable. I'm terrified, if you must know. Terrified of failing him. Terrified of being exactly what you all think I am, a nobody with no business wearing a crown. Kieran started to stand, to go to her, but something in her expression stopped him. She needed to do this. Needed to claim her place. But here's what I know, Isla continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I know Kieran Storvong. Not the Alpha King. Not the political piece you all want to move around your board. The man. I know he hates formal banquets, but loves honey cakes. I know he carries the weight of this kingdom on his shoulders and never lets anyone see how heavy it is. I know he's fierce and loyal and brave beyond measure. She moved closer to the table, meeting each council member's gaze in turn. And I know that he needs someone who sees him. Who reminds him he's more than a crown. Who will stand beside him not because of political advantage, but because loving him is as necessary as breathing. Her voice dropped. Can any of your perfect political matches say the same? The council chamber was utterly silent. Then Kieran stood, moving around the table with the fluid grace of a predator. Isla's breath caught as he approached, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that he could see the rapid flutter of her pulse at her throat. You came, he said softly. I heard what they were saying about me. Isla's jaw set stubbornly. I couldn't let them, I had to. You claimed me. Wonder and fierce satisfaction filled his voice. In front of my council. In front of witnesses. You claimed me as yours. Her cheeks flushed. Yes. I suppose I did. Do you know what that means? Isla shook her head, suddenly uncertain. Kieran's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. It means the bond recognizes your acceptance. It means my wolf knows you've chosen us, completely and without reservation. I have chosen you, Isla whispered. I choose you, Kieran. Crown and all. Fear and all. I choose you. The bond between them blazed like wildfire, visible now even to those without alpha sight, a golden shimmer in the air connecting their hearts, their souls, their very beings. Gasps echoed around the council chamber. The mark, Lady Morrigan breathed. The moon goddess's mark. It's manifesting. Kieran watched in awe as silver gold light traced across Isla's skin, settling just over her heart in the shape of a crescent moon intertwined with a wolf's profile. His own chest burned as the matching mark appeared, binding them together in a way that transcended politics or propriety or any earthly concern. Blessed by the goddess herself, Lord Cashin whispered, sinking to one knee. Forgive me, your majesty. I did not understand. One by one, the council members knelt, acknowledgement and acceptance written on their faces. Isla looked around in bewilderment. What's happening? They're recognizing you, Kieran murmured, pulling her close. My mate. My queen. Chosen by the moon goddess and accepted by the kingdom. But I haven't agreed to be queen. I just said I chose you. Same thing. His smile was soft, radiant with joy. You choose me. You choose everything that comes with me. Crown included. That seems like a significant detail to leave out, Isla said, but her lips were twitching with suppressed laughter. I'm a king. I'm sneaky. Kieran leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Are you going to run? Isla looked up at him, at those golden eyes that saw her completely, that had watched her from his sickbed and fallen in love with her truths. At the man who had fought his way back from darkness because her voice had called him home. No, she said firmly. No more running. You asked me to stay, and I'm staying. Forever, if you'll have me. Forever isn't long enough, Kieran murmured against her lips. But it's a start. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, claiming her before his council and the moon goddess and anyone else who might dare to question their bond. Isla's arms came around his neck, kissing him back with all the love and certainty and fierce determination that had kept him tethered to life during those 7 dark nights. When they finally broke apart, the council chamber erupted in cheers. The coronation took place a month later. Isla stood in the royal chambers, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The woman looking back at her wore a gown of midnight blue silk, shot through with silver thread that caught the light like stars. Her hair had been arranged in an elaborate style she'd never master on her own, woven through with moonflowers and pearls. She looked like a queen. She felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. You're doing it again, Kieran's voice came from behind her. Isla met his eyes in the mirror. Doing what? Doubting yourself. He moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. I can feel it through the bond. Can you blame me? Isla gestured at her reflection. Look at me. I'm about to stand before the entire kingdom and be crowned queen. Me, the girl who once fell in a mud puddle trying to catch a frog. I remember that frog incident, Kieran said, amusement dancing in his eyes. You were 9. The frog got away. Because I was terrible at catching frogs. Isla turned to face him. Just like I'll be terrible at being queen. You saved my life. That was different. You stood up to my council. I was angry. You love me. Kieran cupped her face in his hands. Even though I come with a crown and a kingdom and more responsibility than any one person should carry. You love me anyway. Of course I do, Isla said, like it was obvious. You're you. Exactly. His smile was tender. And I love you because you're you. Not because of what you can do for the kingdom or how perfectly you wear a crown. Because you see me. Because you refuse to let me face the darkness alone. Because you're brave and fierce and entirely yourself, no matter who's watching. I'm still terrified, Isla whispered. Good. Kieran pressed a kiss to her forehead. The day you stop being afraid is the day you stop caring. But Isla, he waited until she looked at him. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right beside you. Every step. Every day. Every crisis and celebration and boring council meeting. Promise? Promise. He held out his hand. Ready to face the kingdom? Isla looked at his outstretched hand, strong and scarred and steady. Then at his face, at those golden eyes that had watched her with love even when she thought him lost to the world. She thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, uncertain, content to live in the shadows. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, claimed by an alpha king, marked by the moon goddess, loved beyond measure. "Ready," she said, and took his hand. The great hall of Storfong Palace was packed to bursting. Every noble house had sent representatives. The common folk crowded the galleries above, craning for a view of their king and his chosen mate. Whispers filled the air, speculation about the common-born girl who'd captured the Alpha King's heart. Isla walked down the central aisle on Kieran's arm, her head high despite the trembling in her knees. She could feel 1,000 eyes on her, judging, measuring, wondering if she was worthy. But she could also feel Kieran's presence beside her, steady as stone. Could feel the bond between them, golden and unbreakable, singing with his confidence in her. "You've got this," his voice whispered through their connection. "Just a little further." "This is insane," she replied. "I'm going to trip. I'm going to fall flat on my face in front of the entire kingdom. Then I'll catch you." The warmth in his mental voice made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "I'll always catch you, Isla." They reached the dais where the Queen Mother waited, holding the crown that would make Isla's transformation complete. The older woman smiled at her, warm, encouraging, the smile of a mother welcoming her daughter home. "Kneel," Kieran murmured. Isla knelt, her gown pooling around her, and looked up at the Queen Mother. "Isla Thorne," the Queen Mother's voice rang out clear and strong. "You come before this kingdom not of noble birth, but of noble heart. You saved our king when death sought to claim him. You loved him when the darkness closed in. You chose him when duty would have been easier." She lifted the crown, delicate silver work to look like moonlight caught in branches, studded with moonstones that gleamed with inner light. "By the power vested in me by the moon goddess and the laws of this kingdom, I crown you Queen of Storfong. May you rule with wisdom, with compassion, and with the courage that brought you to this moment." The crown settled on Isla's head, surprisingly light despite its significance. "Rise, Queen Isla," the Queen Mother said, "and take your place beside your king." Isla stood on shaking legs, turning to face Kieran. He looked at her with such open love, such pride, that her fear melted away like morning frost. "Hello, my queen," he murmured, for her ears alone. "Hello, my king," she whispered back. He took her hand, raising it high so the entire hall could see their joined hands, the matching marks over their hearts glowing faintly with divine blessing. "Behold," Kieran's voice rang out. "Your queen, chosen by fate, blessed by the goddess, claimed by your king's heart." The hall erupted. Cheers shook the rafters. Nobles and common folk alike shouted their approval, their acceptance, their joy at seeing their king so obviously, radiantly happy. Isla felt tears prick her eyes as the sound washed over her. This was real. This was happening. She was standing in the great hall of Stormfong Palace, wearing a crown and a title she'd never imagined, and somehow, impossibly, it felt right. "Thank you," she whispered to Kieran through their bond. "For what?" "For seeing me. For loving me. For making me believe I could be this." His hand tightened on hers. "You were always this, Isla. You just needed someone to show you." That night, they stood together on the balcony of the royal chambers, looking out over the kingdom spread below them. Lights twinkled in the darkness, homes and hearths, lives being lived, people sleeping peacefully under the protection of their king and queen. "Do you remember," Kieran said softly, "what you told me that third night? When you thought I couldn't hear?" Isla leaned back against his chest, his arms coming around her waist. "I said a lot of embarrassing things that third night. You said you saw me at the market sometimes, watched me looking tired, and wished you could ask if I was all right." His chin rested on top of her head. "I was watching you too, you know. Every time I saw you in a crowd, I'd find myself drawn to you, wondering if you remembered me. Hoping you did. Why didn't you say something? Pride. Duty. Fear." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "All the stupid reasons that nearly cost me everything. If I hadn't been injured, If you hadn't been summoned to my bedside, I might have gone my whole life never telling you the truth. The universe has a strange sense of timing, Isla murmured. The moon goddess has a strange sense of humor, Kieran corrected. Nearly killing me just to force me to confess my feelings seems excessive. Isla laughed, the sound bright and free. Maybe you needed the dramatic gesture. You are rather stubborn, says the woman who argued with my entire council. They deserved it. They absolutely did. He turned her in his arms so she faced him, the moonlight painting her in silver and shadow. I love you, Isla Thorne. My queen. My mate. My salvation. I love you too, Isla whispered. My king. My heart. My home. They stood together under the moon's watchful gaze, two souls bound by fate and choice, by past and future, by love that had survived darkness and emerged stronger. Below them, the kingdom of Stormfang slept peacefully, protected by an alpha king who had fought his way back from death's door and a common-born queen who had refused to let him go. And in the distance, a wolf howled a song of joy, of recognition, of two souls finally, completely, perfectly joined. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.